Well, good day everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Well, if you've been watching this typewriter video series for the last few years, you might know that in the last month or so I've made a number of videos about electric typewriters. We had electric typewriter rodeo video and also a couple of videos about the electronic daisy wheel typewriters. And all of this has been in a larger effort to educate and inform you guys about the wider world of typewriters beyond manual typewriters themselves, and how these tools can become for us very useful for creative writing. Well, I'm very fortunate to have as a friend Kevin Kittle, and he brought over several typewriters that I haven't reviewed. One of them is a Royal branded Typewriter electric made by Silver Seiko in Japan. One of them is an Olivetti electric typewriter machine made in the German Democratic Republic. And he also brought over an Epson daisy wheel electronic typewriter and his IBM personal Selectric typewriter. If you've watched this channel for a while, you know that I've been passionate about connecting you with writing tools in the form of various typewriters. So let's take a look at the Royal electric typewriter machine and the Olivetti. Well, first of all, I think it's important that we define our terms. Some people have commented that they don't really know what I mean when I say type bar electric. Well, these are like manual typewriters. They use these little hammers or arms called type bars that have the type slugs that make the actual letter imprint on the paper. But rather than being completely manually operated solely by finger power, they use an electric motor to assist in the operation of the machine. So they're like an electrified manual typewriter. I still look upon them as being mechanical. It's a mechanical typewriter with electric assist is a good way to put it. So this is a Silver Seiko made in Japan in 1972. Royal, the model badging is 1200 electric, but the actual model number on the back panel is SP-8500. Keep in mind that in the future I'm going to be doing a more detailed comparison video between this and its manual Royal Mercury counterpart, but I will be pointing out to you here some of the features that are very similar to the Royal Mercury manual typewriters. Well, my general impression of the machine is the first thing you notice, of course, the carrying case is all plastic and the external body shell is all plastic. The ribbon cover, the upper part, and the lower part here. Having said that, it's not a bad machine. In fact, Kevin and I were pleasantly surprised by a lot of things about this typewriter. Well, first of all, it's badged as a 1200 electric Royal Lytton logo award series. And the first thing I noticed is it's very similar to the Royal Mercury, but there's one huge difference besides the fact that it is electric powered. And that is that it uses a 9/16 inch wide ribbon. That's right, it's a 1/16 of an inch wider than the standard half-inch ribbon. We're not really sure why. And also, if you look at the shifting on it, it is a carriage shift, but it's the kind of shifting that's pivoting. It pivots the carriage shift rather than lifting the entire carriage. So the carriage shift is electric assisted, but it's very short throw. So one of the things that we first noticed when we turned on the machine is it's very quiet. In fact, it's one of the quietest electric typewriters that I know of. I think the Hermes 10, my family's typewriter, is almost as quiet, but this is really quiet. Now, in a really quiet room on a hard desk, you'll hear it. But outdoors, yesterday afternoon, we were sitting out on my patio, and just with ambient outdoor sounds, I really couldn't hear this machine at all. And it is a really nice typewriter, considering you would think it's kind of a cheaper, later electric typewriter, maybe not as solid as an old pre-World War II manual machine, but our feelings about this are quite good, in fact. So before we get into test typing it, let's just quickly look at all the features. Well, first of all, the power cord, which you can see a little bit of right there, uses a 3-prong US style cord on this model, so you will need a 3-to-2 adapter if you happen to be plugging into an older house with only 2-prong outlets. Just keep that in mind. Oh, it has the standard Royal Mercury style push the little lever like that, paper support, the standard push and slide margin settings. And then the thing that's really noticeable about this machine is the carriage lock is the dot that's above the single line spacing right there. So it has the standard 1, 1.5, and 2 line spacing of the Royal Mercury, and also there is a 0 setting above double line spacing, which is the non-ratcheted line spacing. So it only has a single carriage release lever here on the right side, in keeping with its portable nature, being similar to the Royal Mercury portable. And then the other thing that's similar to the Royal Mercury is the paper release lever. Instead of pulling toward you like most typewriters would work, you push it away from you to release the pressure on the feed rollers. Okay, you have your bichrome setting on the right side between red, black, and white, which is lower, upper, and stencil setting. On the left is the power switch. This does have power shifting, so the carriage lifts up or tilts based on the motor's action. There's a carriage lock, and the power shift will release the carriage lock with either button. The space bar does not have auto repeat. However, the X, the period, and the dash hyphen do auto repeat. Other than that, the keyboard layout is essentially a modern US-style electric typewriter keyboard, meaning you not only have the 1 and exclamation mark, the equals and plus, but you have the more modern location of the apostrophe and quote mark to the right of the colon and semicolon. This machine has fixed tabs, a tab every 10 spaces. So one of the things I did notice about this machine was the plastic ribbon cover is really difficult to pull off, and it turns out that you kind of have to assist it. It has the little posts that fit into the rubber bushings, and this particular typewriter, the bushings are very tight. So here are the 2 metal posts, and they fit into these black rubber bushings here and here. Here you can see the 9/16 inch ribbon spools, and other than that, it's a pretty standard silver Seiko Royal Mercury-like layout inside of here. Well, let's thread some paper into this, shall we? Manual carriage return, and I really like the feel of this machine. Well, this Olivetti is a pretty large machine in terms of footprint. It is made in the German Democratic Republic, which is otherwise known as East Germany, by the Robotron factory. So one of the few Olivettis, there were a few models that were made by Robotron. It has a plastic ribbon cover like this that fits on, similar in philosophy to the classic manual Olivetti, with a little lever like that kind of goes down into a slot. But the whole top here, here, and here is a crinkle finish painted metal surface. It's pretty easy to take the bottom of the machine off. You know, I don't have an exact date on it, but I'm guessing it was made maybe in the early 70s or mid 1970s. I'm not really sure, but it certainly is after the acquisition of Underwood by Olivetti, because there are some obvious Underwood margin scale indications here, just the way this margin indicator is here, and also right here, these numbers, which you probably can't see very well, but this is sort of classic Underwood style that Underwood has been using since the early days of the Underwood manual typewriter. So that's a philosophy that Olivetti inherited from Underwood when they bought the company. You first of all have 2 scales. The bottom scale goes from 0 to 108, which is the actual character spacing, right? And then this upper scale is used for centering titles or whatever. And the way that happens, I'm going to have to turn the machine on here to show you, pardon the noise. So the way you do that is you first of all want to go all the way to the 0 position on the scale here. And let's say I wanted to type the phrase Underwood typewriter. So for every letter and space, I count one space, so UNDERWOOD space TYPEWRITER, and that points to 44 on the upper scale. So that means if I move my typing position now to 44, which is right here, if I type Underwood typewriter, it will be properly centered on the page right there. So this centering method with this dual scale goes all the way back to the early manual Underwood standard machines. So it's post the Underwood merger, right? It is a Type R Electric, of course, and it has a rather interesting feature, which is it not only has a cloth ribbon, but it has a cover-up correction tape built in. So these orange spools is a cover-up correction tape, gets threaded behind the regular cloth ribbon through the same vibrator guides. And also the threading path for the main print ribbon is classic Olivetti, with the two forked guides being way out here and this roller, guide roller way out near the corner. That's classic Olivetti. The ribbon spools, however, they do have a wide shaft, but they don't use the knurled shoulder nut of the earlier manual Olivettis. They just sit in place and they're held down by the ribbon cover itself. So starting up here on the carriage, it has a paper support lever very similar to the Studio 45. And in fact, the mechanism underneath looks very much like an electrified version of the Studio 45, that kind of generation of typewriter. So late 60s, early 70s probably. And then the margin indicators are push and slide, but they have this interesting little notch right in the margin indicators, so you can kind of tell more exactly what line you're looking at when you do set it. There is a paper guide right here, and the paper guide numbers are set to the width of the paper. So they go 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, etc. So if you set like an 8.5-inch wide paper, in fact, there is a diamond on the 8.5-inch wide, so that's letter size US. If you were to set that paper in there on the diamond, you would be centering the paper on the carriage. So there is a 1, 2, 3 line spacing indicator, and there is a 0 indicator, which is the variable. The left plat knob has also a variable. So this variable up here is the temporary adjustment, whereas this one here on the center button on the left knob, you push it and it is a permanent adjustment to the line spacing. On the right side is your paper release lever. And there is a carriage release button on both the left and the right side. And the right one is classic Olivetti style, where it's sort of built for your thumb. The interesting thing about this keyboard, even though it was an electric Type R machine made in the 1970s, we presume, or late 1960s, it does not have a number 1 key. The apostrophe is a shifted 8. It's basically like a manual typewriter keyboard. That's probably the worst thing about this machine. It's laid out as a manual typewriter, so it does not have the convenience of an unshifted apostrophe. And this button over here is the tab set and tab clear, which, if you know, the manual Olivettis had the tab set and clear in the same location, but they never labeled it. So it's actually nice to have it labeled. And there is a half space key. Let me turn the machine on here. So pressing and holding down is half a space, releasing is another half a space. It has automatic on the space bar, the X, the period, and the shifted 6 being the underscore. So the correction system deserves to be looked at a little more closely here. So you have the ribbon color selector. It's really only a selection between black or whatever the ribbon color is and stencil. You can't actually use the lower half of the ribbon for typing on like a bichrome ribbon, because the bottom position is correction mode only, which means it's not actually using the bottom of the ribbon, it's using the correction tape that's behind the ribbon. And then you have this other key, a correction key, and what that does is it enables you to correct the previous character that you've just typed. Let's say an M, and then I want to correct it, so I press the correction key. It operates as a backspace, and you hold it and you type the M, and it covers it up with the white cover-up tape. In the C position, what that does, it enables you to keep the correction tape feature working, and you can fully correct whatever characters you want to cover up, like this whole line of characters I just typed. For instance, there, you do have to retype the same characters as you typed earlier in order to erase them. So this is sort of like a one-time only correction. This is continuous correction mode. Olivetti are known for having at least one red key on their keyboard, and oftentimes it was the tab key on a lot of the earlier Olivettis. In this case, it is a keyboard release key. In fact, there's even a label here. Depress keyboard release to reactivate keyboard. Well, what does reactivate keyboard mean? Well, if you jam a couple keys together like that, and now the machine isn't responding, you hit that to release it. So if you do something stupid that jams up the mechanism, that will release it. And the reason why they have that is because the drive mechanism that drives the type bars is unique or different in this machine from a lot of other electric type bar machines. You may also notice there is no margin release button on the keyboard. This keyboard release that functions to de-jam the machine is also the margin release. So I have the margin set to about the edge of the paper here. So it stops there, you hit the keyboard release, now you can go all the way to the right. And the tabulator is a manual tabulator, so I have the machine unplugged. You do have to turn on the power switch to unlock the carriage, but the tab key, even without any power on it, it's a manual tabulator, whereas the backspace is powered. Okay, on the very front of the machine, you have the power switch on the left, rotating. You have a touch control, it goes from low to M, which is medium, to F, which is full, not H for high, low, medium, and full. And then you have copy set. So 1 to 2 copies, 2 to 3, or 3 to 4. So basically how hard the type bars hit the platen. I have it set to the lowest setting right now. But let's just do some test typing, shall we? Backspace. It is a powered backspace. Here are typeface samples from both the Olivetti and the Royal. They both appear to be 10 characters per inch typeface pica in size. Well, I'm assuming that the Olivetti was designed more as a semi-business kind of typewriter, whereas the Royal is more of a student and personal kind of electric typewriter. So maybe the Olivetti types a little faster. So let's power them both on. Okay. Okay, now let's try this one. And I jammed it. Well, I get the sense that the Olivetti is probably a little faster. The key travel on the Royal, the Olivetti definitely has a shorter key travel. It's maybe only 3 or 4 millimeters, whereas the Royal is maybe 4 or 5 millimeters, just a little bit longer of a key travel. And also, the spring tension on the Royal is a little bit firmer, whereas the Olivetti is lighter, almost, maybe almost too light, or if you're kind of sloppy with your touch typing, you might inadvertently hit the wrong keys. And of course they do have this red keyboard de-jammer, keyboard release button in it. It's probably easy to jam the keys up. Let's try again. There you go. Jam it up. You can certainly type fast on it. I mean, I think you can type pretty quick on both of them. Certainly this will probably handle as fast as I can type accurately. This is probably faster than I can type accurately. I get the sense that maybe this one is a little easier to jam up because the keys are so light. But it's a pretty quick machine, and most Type R electrics I've found are really quick. Now, here's an issue that a novice to typewriters might get deceived by or led astray by, is the idea of built-in correction on the Olivetti might be very tempting for a novice in typewriters to want to get this machine strictly for that capability. However, this is not like lift-off correction on a daisy-wheel electronic machine or an IBM Selectric. This is a cover-up correction with a chalky white film, and these cover-up ribbons are not easy to find. You can get them, but they're not easy to find, and they're kind of messy, and they don't really do a perfect job of covering up. They do leave a little bit of residue behind, and I would recommend, actually, if you're going to be doing any kind of correction on a typewriter like these, a cloth ribbon typewriter, use the correction tabs or use the roll-on correction cartridges. Those are the two best ways of doing correction. So I wouldn't buy this machine because you think that it's going to give you perfect, pristine cover-up corrections. It doesn't really. And what you sacrifice in this machine is you don't get the opportunity to use the bottom edge of the ribbon like a bichrome ribbon. You have to use a single color ribbon with this. On the other hand, this machine gives you the ability to use dual color or bichrome ribbons, but it's a 9/16 ribbon on this particular model, not a 1/2 inch. Again, I would prefer this machine. I like kind of the way it feels, the size of it, and it's a lot quieter. I kind of prefer it. The other issue might be keyboard size. Now I'm going to measure from the second row from the Q up over to the fraction. So that row is the same on both typewriters. And on the Royal, it measures 205 millimeters. And on the Olivetti, it measures 195 millimeters. So the Olivetti has a slightly more cramped keyboard and shorter key travel and much easier, almost too easy of keys to hit, whereas this is slightly wider, maybe for bigger hands, and a little more spring tension, not quite so overly sensitive. Another reason maybe why I like it so much. My intention with these series of videos about electric and electronic typewriters is not to sway you away from manual typewriters, but rather to point you in the direction that there are other tools, other typewriter devices that can perhaps offer you a interesting and unique creative experience. I know for myself and a lot of other people, the lack of finger effort required on an electric or electronic typewriter is a real benefit for us who want to focus on creative writing and not have to think as much about the haptics or the mechanics of the writing process. And also, as I alluded to earlier, for a lot of new people to the typewriter world, they are often very curious about electric and electronic typewriters, and to them, they see less of a distinction between manuals and electronic and electric typewriters. So I think being open-minded to these tools is really important to helping us be creative. I, for one, find writing with a electric or electronic typewriter to be a lot of fun. It's not the same as a manual typewriter, but it is a lot of fun, and you can throw down a lot of words effortlessly on paper. And of course, the whole purpose is to enable us to be more creative. And as always, I wish you the very best in creativity, and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.